Hello, I'm Janet Marana, the Executive Director of Priests for Life. I also co-founded the Silent No More Awareness Campaign, which is the largest mobilization of women, men, and family members while hurt by abortion have come through healing and now speak publicly about their regret. Welcome to our program this afternoon. Well, and of course, today's program, we're going to again go back into our archives to find another program that Father Pavone and I did for Sky Angel a number of years ago called The Gospel of Life. Now, on today's program, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Teresa Burke. Now, she is the founder and developer of Rachel's Vineyard, which is the largest retreat program, not just in the United States, but all over the world for healing after abortion. We're talking about healing for women and men. And like I said, siblings who've lost a sibling to abortion, they're mourning that and they want to go through healing. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, so many people of the family have been touched by abortion. And the Rachel's Vineyard Retreat program that Dr. Burke founded is here for them. So let's now watch the words of Dr. Teresa Burke, and then when we come back, I'll have a lot more information for you.
What is the church doing to bring those wounded by abortion back to Jesus? Find out next on Gospel of Life. Hello, brothers and sisters. I'm Reverend Frank Pavone, Director of Gospel of Life Ministries. Welcome again to our program. Each and every day, you and I are surrounded by men and women who have been wounded by abortion, who have lost children to this violent act. They are in our families, in our congregations, in our places of work and recreation. They are everywhere. And you and I, as disciples of Jesus Christ, want to reach out to them with compassion and care. The church cares about their suffering, about their wounds, and wants to lead them back to the peace of Christ. Today we're going to talk about some of the ways that that happens, and in particular about what some of those wounds are and what people do about them. We have here with us our co-host Janet Marana, our Associate Director, and also Dr. Teresa Burke, a psychologist and a leader in the effort to bring about healing after abortion. She is on our staff of Gospel of Life Ministries, and she also founded Rachel's Vineyard, which is a retreat program for those who have been wounded by abortion. Welcome, Teresa.
Hi.
Janet, good to be with you as always.
Yes.
Tell us, first of all, about how you got involved in this whole area of working with the trauma of abortion.
Well, I was a counselor, and I was actually doing a field placement in graduate school in the treatment of eating disorders. So the groups that I ran were anorexics, women that suffered from bulimia. And the subject of abortion came up one night because one of the girls, Debbie, was complaining about flashbacks and nightmares she was having to an abortion experience. And she said, these images are terrible enough for me to deal with, but then her ex-husband would call and he'd leave messages on her answering machine calling her a murderer. And when she would get these messages, she would be overcome with despair and grief and sometimes slit her wrists with a razor and end up in the psych ward of the local hospital. So she's sharing about this story, and another woman in our group for eating disorders said, you know, your husband's a horrible man, and everybody nodded their heads, and she said, I had an abortion too, and it would just kill me if somebody kept reminding me about it. And then there was another woman who stood up and started cursing, and she said, you know, to heck with anybody who tries to make me feel guilty about my abortion. Having an abortion is the best thing I ever did. And she cursed out everybody else that would make her feel bad. And then another girl got up and left the room, slammed the door, and we could hear her car screeching out of the parking lot. And you have to remember, I'm a dumb graduate student. You know, I didn't have a whole lot of experience. And this was like a bomb going off in our group.
So here's a group dealing with eating disorders. You have no idea that abortion is going to surface, and it just throws everything into
It came up,
chaos.
and I called the girl who left later that night, and I said, you were so upset when you left. Are you okay? And she said, I wish we could focus on eating disorders instead of abortion. And then I said, did you have one too? And she said, it was a long time ago. I don't want to talk about it. So when I went to the psychiatrist who was supervising me in my field placement and told him what happened, he shook his finger at me and he said, "You have no business prying into people's abortions, that abortion is a private, personal thing, and I was instructed not to bring it up again." And I said, "But I didn't bring it up. It was Debbie. She's having nightmares and flashbacks. I think she has post-traumatic stress disorder." And he said that those nightmares are caused as a psychotic reaction from the medication she's on. And he told me not to bring it up again. Well, then I could think of nothing else to do. I started one of the first therapeutic support groups for healing after abortion. I left that place. I was upset because he was so closed to the fact that abortion could be at the root of something like an eating disorder, because as it turned out, everyone in our group had had an abortion except for 2 people who had experienced sexual abuse.
So if you're in the mental health profession, just as if you're in any health profession, don't you want to look for anything that's going to affect people's health? And you know, this is what's amazing about that supervisor is he wasn't saying to you, look, here are the studies that we've carefully examined what the impact of abortion is, and we've come to the conclusion that it does not cause this particular problem. He didn't say that, did he? He just said, we don't want to talk about abortion.
He forbade me to talk about it. And I saw there that it was forbidden grief. And I thought that this group represents a microcosm of our society, because there's people out there like Debbie who are in tremendous pain. They want to talk about it. There's other people who the subject of abortion is so painful that they can't even hear the word. They can't even say the word abortion. And that's the girl that left. She had to get out of there. That's a symptom of trauma, avoidance. She wanted to remove herself because the thoughts and the feelings that the discussion was invoking in her were so painful, she had to flee. You know, fight or flight. She chose to flee. And then the other girl that was so angry, you know, anger is one of the stages of grief. And there's so many people, we could see feminists throughout this nation who are still stuck in the anger stage of their grief. And they use that as a defense mechanism, but it actually shut down. That girl who got up and started cursing and defending the right to abortion actually shut down any meaningful exploration that we might have had about what people were feeling in that moment. And that's how you treat eating disorders. You want to get to the feeling that's under that. And as I went on to study this, I learned how eating disorders and many other symptoms are actually reenactments of the trauma. And this is an interesting way to look at many of the symptoms that people have, because they don't connect the anxiety and the depression that they suffer, the suicidal thoughts and feelings, the eating disorder, or the relationship difficulties as a way that they're expressing a symptom from the original trauma. And that's what reenactment is all about. You find another way to tell the story, because the abortion itself is so horrific. It's so disturbing to the person who's had one. All that women want to do is move on with their lives. They want to forget that they ever even had it. They bury it so deep in the depth of their memories and in the depth of their soul, but that festers and it comes out in other ways. The story has to be told. You know, you're always one that says the truth is marching on, yes. And the truth finds a way to come out.
It finds a way to come out. And
it comes out through our symptoms, through the self-destructive behaviors, which, you know, someone who's acting suicidal, having suicidal thoughts and fantasies, or other ways that the trauma is telling the story in their lives. That's what the symptoms are.
Right. Now, those girls, for them to have developed an eating disorder, how long ago were their abortions, some of them? I mean, was it a year or two ago, or how long does it really take, from your experience, from the time someone has an abortion, for some of these more like severe symptoms to begin to magnify themselves?
Well, I think that it starts out with the feeling of complete shame and disgust at oneself, the need to keep a secret. And some women begin throwing up right away. They come home from the clinic, they lurch over a toilet bowl, and they just start vomiting. And they talk about wanting to, it's like you want to get that experience out of you. You've just internalized something terrible, deeply traumatic. And so you're also hiding a secret. So for a lot of women, the eating disorder represents a secret that they're trying to keep. For other women, it's a way they're trying to get all these disgusting feelings out of themselves, because you look at an eating disorder, what they're left with after they purge themselves is shame. or over their body image is shame. So they find ways to express that shame, a way to have a secret, a way to recreate even the cramping that accompanied their abortion. So, it can get, there's a lot of complex dynamics that I write extensively about in Forbidden Grief.
So Forbidden Grief is the title of the book that you have written to delve into a lot of these connections between having an abortion and not just eating disorders. That happened to be the problem that first awakened you to this phenomenon, but many other kinds of behaviors, some of which very self-destructive, and we're going to delve in a little bit more to some other examples. But the book Forbidden Grief can be obtained, Janet, through our ministry.
Right, through Gospel Life Ministries, and I recommend it really to everyone to read. For pastors, it's a great resource. People who work with youth groups, very often you'll have a kid come in, a teenager, and a girl, their behavior, like you would probably say, Teresa, would suddenly change.
Yes.
You have to be alert for these signs, and I think if they read Forbidden Grief, it will really assist them in kind of being a watchdog to say, what's troubling this person? Why did their grades suddenly drop, or why are they suddenly withdrawn,
So like you say, pastors, youth ministers, people who, because we don't get to choose the kinds of problems that we have to help people sort out. And that's a type of freedom that supervisor under whom you worked thought that he had. That we, if we don't want to deal with a particular problem or cause of another problem, well, we can just dismiss it. No, that's not professional. That's certainly not pastoral. That doesn't even make sense. We don't choose the kind of problems people are going to bring to us. We're open to say, you're coming to me with a problem, let's figure out what it is.
And to listen to the person, because I think that too many times they're given a diagnosis that never addresses the root issue that's driving the depression. And so you see women languishing in mental health hospitals. There is a 162% increase in psychiatric admissions for psychosis and some very serious mental health problems, but they don't allow them to make abortion an issue. No one thinks to screen, is there a pregnancy loss in your history? So if a woman comes complaining of depression, or maybe she's acting out in a way, having affairs, through which she's shaming herself, through which she's keeping a secret, because the themes of the abortion are what you act out.
You have in the book a chapter on substance abuse. So what are how and why would a person who's had an abortion end up abusing alcohol or drugs?
It's a very common symptom of trauma because you're trying to repress and forget and numb yourself to the pain. This wound is so deep. It's a soul wound, and the pain of it doesn't stop. And so the best that people can do is try to run away and escape that. And boy, that's accessible. It's easy, drugs and alcohol. And even women who are pregnant are 10 times more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol. When they're pregnant, they can't, if you think of the pregnancy later, a wanted pregnancy, but it's a trigger of all their memories and feelings related to trauma. And so that time of pregnancy, they can have a lot of memories that they want to numb. And even though they know that places their newborn at a risk, because of the trauma, they can't deal with the feelings, and the need to numb it is more powerful than the need to.
What about multiple abortions? We read, for example, about actually the Centers for Disease Control, which is an arm of the government and keeps statistics on various diseases and on the abortion procedure, tells us that almost half of those who are getting abortions in America today have had one or more abortions before. And it's an amazing number of people, likewise, who have had not just one abortion before, but 2 or 3. We've worked with women who have had 9, 10, or even more abortions. And I even know of a case of someone who had 24 abortions. If abortion is such a negative and painful experience, which we know it is, what leads people to do it again and again?
That's actually a symptom of trauma. Repetition is one of the greatest indicators that we have that someone's been traumatized. And so when girls are going back to the clinic again and again, because they've never dealt with the original loss, they've never grieved the loss of the first child, they repeat it again and again.
To try to master it somehow, to try to understand it.
They're releasing trauma-related tension. They're telling the story of what happened again. Yeah. And Judy Garland's a great example of somebody who had this conflict with her first abortion at the age of 20. and it was a child she wanted after she was married, and she kept having affairs with different men and creating pregnancy fantasies where she would pretend she was pregnant, and they would tell her that you're going to have an abortion. And even on a fantasy level, she was recreating this emotional experience of abandonment and betrayal with different men. And so you can see that women will act it out by getting pregnant again and again. And, you know, you and I were just talking to a woman that runs a Planned Parenthood, and she was saying how frustrated she gets when she says the women aren't learning their lesson. You know, they keep coming back again and again. And it's like that's a symptom of trauma, that this is a devastating experience, and people don't recognize it for the serious repercussions that it will have. And so they're not seeing this in the light and the framework of deeply damaging to women, and an experience that they'll continue to recreate until they're numb to it. And it happens. I mean, the first time a girl goes into an abortion clinic, she's very nervous, she's terrified, she has a lot of anxiety, and it's probably the worst experience of her life. And she'll look around her and see women just sitting there like they're at the salon under a beauty dryer, you know? And they'll say, like, how can you be so casual about this? And the woman next to her will say, oh, don't worry, honey, this is my 8th. It's no big deal. So they do, in a sense, master the trauma when they can become so numb to what they're doing, that they've mastered those original feelings of terror, of horror. And we know this from other populations that have been traumatized, victims of rape. They're the ones who will go out after their rape and be in the middle of Central Park at 4 a.m. You know, they put themselves in harm's way again and again.
What happens to women, though, who've gone on to, you know, say marry, have children? You hear these cases in the news of real serious child abuse, mothers drowning their children. And is abortion, you think, affecting them, too, that they've had a prior abortion, and this is one of the reasons why that they're doing? Is it, most people say, oh, it must be postpartum depression, and there's so many kids. But is abortion also, as far as you've seen?
Well, there's just many cases that are linked, where child abuse is linked, and certainly the infanticide. And again, I would view that as a traumatic reenactment. Woman who burned her house down with all her children in it, you know, the very week she had her abortion. Another woman threw herself off a bridge with her kids in her arms, trying to reunite the family because she had just had an abortion, reuniting the family in death. It was so traumatic for her. I think that you can look at some of the instances of child abuse as a reenactment. The other thing is your maternal identity is damaged in an abortion. For some reason, there's an unspoken message that you're inadequate, that it's better for you to destroy the life of this child than to have you as a mom. And that's how women feel, that I'm inadequate. And then long after, you know, they're in a stable relationship, they want their children, but they have this very deep-seated belief about themselves that is not true. Right. But because they haven't done their grief work, because they haven't reconciled this, they continue acting in that way. So they'll do things with the child that shames themselves and makes them feel like a terrible, bad mom. You know, Andrea Yates was the one that said she heard some voice in her head saying, it's time for you to be punished. And I think, punished for what? But that's the kind of thinking that we've heard so many women who've had abortions who can later share that, you know, I felt like I needed to be punished. I thought God was going to punish me. You know, I did write to Russell Yates, and I asked if his wife had had an abortion, and he told me she had had a miscarriage. But we also know that 50% of women conceal the fact that they've ever had abortions.
Well, this book certainly is a treasure of not just information, but insight. And that's why I want to, we're out of time now, but I want to urge our viewers again to get Forbidden Grief, contacting Gospel of Life, and read through it. Now, not just for the pastors or youth professionals, but those who work in the health profession, and just anyone who wants to understand how those around them have been damaged by abortion, and how they may be, without even understanding it, living out these consequences in some of the negative ways that you've described. So thanks for the research that you've done here, and we'll have you back on other programs to talk about it even in more depth. Janet, any final...
No, just that I really think that people have to realize, too, anyone who's watching, that if they've had an abortion, there's hope and healing. And we'll talk about that in another show, but we'll have hotline numbers up that they can call for help if they know someone who's had an abortion.
Yes. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Stay with us now for our action segment.
When I found out I was pregnant, I thought I would lose my job.
My boyfriend told me to choose between him and the baby.
I was already struggling to care for one child, so I had an abortion.
I had trouble conceiving again.
I tried to commit suicide.
I started to have nightmares.
You see, abortion didn't solve our problems.
It just created different ones.
That's why we are silent no more.
We found help and healing, and you can too. Call or go online today.
Hello, this is Dr. Teresa Burke, the founder of Rachel's Vineyard. One of the many ways to healing after an abortion is a Rachel's Vineyard retreat. This retreat program is increasingly used throughout the world, and it's become a ministry of Priests for Life. The weekend experience is rooted in Scripture and the sacraments, and various biblical events are relived by the participants who, for example, are approached by the priest and ask the same thing that Jesus asked the blind man before healing him. What do you want me to do for you? Participants are able to share their pain in an atmosphere of support and confidentiality, and to understand how their abortion has affected various aspects of life, and to learn from the stories of others, and to confess their sins, and to have a memorial service for their child. For more information, visit rachelsvineyard.org. Hi, I'm Dr. Teresa Burke, founder of Rachel's Vineyard. If all the abortions stop tomorrow, the work of healing the wounds will have only just begun. Moms, dads, grandparents, relatives, friends, abortionists, they all need healing from the devastation that abortion brings. And we all need to accompany their healing with prayer. Now, Father Frank Pavone has written a new booklet called In the Heart of His Mercy, with prayers that we can all say for those wounded by abortion, and special prayers that those with direct involvement in abortion can say. These prayers are based on Father Frank's long experience as pastoral director of Rachel's Vineyard, the world's largest ministry for healing after abortion, and of the Silent No More awareness campaign. The gospel of life is the gospel of mercy. Order In the Heart of His Mercy today at prolifeproducts.org.
Maybe you know someone who's hurting from abortion, and now, the pandemic is dying down, and while we did have to cancel retreats for several months, they're beginning to open back up again. So you can go to a simple website, abortionforgiveness.com. Again, that's abortionforgiveness.com. All you have to do is type in your zip code, and what will come up is the nearest Rachel's Vineyard program to where you live or where your friend lives. Because, maybe you know a friend in another state that's hurting from abortion, and you thinking like, well, gee, there's Rachel's Vineyard in my neighborhood, but what about theirs? This is a perfect way to find out. You put in that zip code, and you'll see where is the nearest Rachel's Vineyard. Now, when you go to the website and you see where the retreat site is, there's always a contact person there. And that's what we call the very first voice or email that someone who's looking for a retreat will talk to. And I encourage you to do that. They're there for you. And maybe their next retreat maybe is not for another 6 weeks or 2 months, because that's when the retreat center they use is opening up again. But in the meantime, every Rachel's Vineyard retreat group has a licensed counselor connected with that program, and they will be in touch with that person who maybe wants to get the healing going but needs to talk to someone now. And so I want to encourage you, be ambassadors of this message. Go to abortionforgiveness.com. Now also, I showed you just now, actually it was Teresa Burke did it, about a beautiful prayer book written by Father Pavone, In the Heart of His Mercy. I really would like you to contact me at orders@priestforlife.org. And we would love to get that booklet out to you. In the Heart of His Mercy. Now, this is a great booklet for prayers, whether or not you've had an abortion, or even if you know someone who's had an abortion. There are prayers there that we all can be saying for the moms who are hurting from that, losing that child to abortion, the dads, the grandparents. There are even prayers in there for the abortionists themselves, because they are too need healing, and many of those abortionists are beginning to come out of the abortion industry, and they need our prayer support. So you could be prayer warriors. Again, order that booklet, In the Heart of His Mercy. Send me a message at orders@priestforlife.org. All you have to do is give me your address and say, hey, Janet, I want In the Heart of His Mercy. Tell me how many copies, and my staff will get it out to you today. Well, thank you for joining us. And again, remember, everyone just about out there knows someone who's hurt from abortion. The question is, are you able to be an ambassador of the hope and healing and reach out to them, the hand of mercy that's waiting for them? And going on a retreat like Rachel's Vineyard is taking those first steps back to the Lord and getting total forgiveness. Because you know what? Very often, women will go into confession and get that forgiveness of the Lord. But the other step that's harder is forgiving themselves. That's what Rachel's Vineyard can do for them. So again, go to abortionforgiveness.com and take those first steps to healing. Thank you, and God bless.